So, this scene in Andor, was it a plot hole? Is it a mistake in the lore? We're going to discuss this moment and others in today's video, while also taking some of your questions. Hey guys, welcome to the video. Hope everyone's doing well. Andor has obviously been blazing its own trail in a way a lot of us have really enjoyed. But is it stepping on the toes of other projects and other bits of Star Wars lore? Well, sort of. First of all, this moment where we see the KX droid, which would eventually become K2SO, tanking blaster bolts, yeah, that's an inconsistency. We see what it looks like when a K2 droid gets shot in Rogue One, and while he does have durable armor, not as durable as at Gorman. There are, of course, explanations if you're looking for them. Perhaps he's got a shield unit which is dissipating most of the energy but was exhausted at the time of Rogue One. Sure, I think that makes sense. You could argue that the blasters being used by the stormtroopers are simply more powerful, although I don't really buy that. Either way, it is an inconsistency, not one that bothers me in the slightest, and I hope it doesn't bother you either. However, one moment that I know is bothering some Star Wars fans is what truly is a retcon of K2SO's origin story, or at least how he meets Cassian Andor. So originally, the first interaction between Cassian and K2SO was in the one-shot canon comic book named after the two characters. I'm going to be completely honest, I have not read this one. I do know that people who've read it seem to enjoy it. Either way, the two would have met under different circumstances on a different planet, but obviously that's been completely retconned by the show. And I mean, this is kind of what I explained would happen. Not to dredge up old wounds here, but Lucasfilm, when wiping Legends from the canon slate, made the statement that everything in canon, the new canon, would be of equal status, whereas Legends had tiered canon. Basically, anything George Lucas made would supersede anything another author made, and typically newer stuff would supersede the really old stuff. The idea with the new Star Wars canon was that the books would be equal to the movies, would be equal to the comic books, as I discussed in a recent video. That's just not practical. The audience for a comic book or a novel will be minuscule compared to a Star Wars movie or TV show, which casts a very wide net. So it makes no sense from a purely economic standpoint to have the really big, high profile, potentially profit generating project hampered by something far more niche. So yeah, Cassian and K2's comic origin story is now retconned. Perhaps Disney will do something. In the past, they've been a little cheeky with Cassian's origin from Fest, and I actually anticipated this happening before the season launched. I did a video all about tiers of continuity in the new canon, and I guess that the characters would be getting a new origin story. Either way, for me, it's not a big deal. I haven't read the novel again, but I don't think it's going to come close to Episode 8, which in my opinion was essentially a masterpiece. Anyway, there was another somewhat contentious moment in the most recent episodes, specifically regarding a certain someone's speech to the wider galaxy. I'm talking, of course, about Mon Mothma. In Star Wars Rebels episode Secret Cargo, we learn that Mon Mothma has defected from the Empire, has fled the Imperial Senate after giving a speech critical of Emperor Palpatine, holding him personally responsible for the Gorman massacre. Obviously, that sounds a lot like what happened with Mon Mothma in episode 9 of season 2, but we get a snippet of the speech, and in it, what Mon Mothma says is slightly different. Now, my preference would have been, who cares? Star Wars Rebels was a different medium. The words are different, but the story is essentially the same. They can be the same thing. You know, this has happened in the past. If you've ever read the Revenge of the Sith novelization, for example, the words in some of the scenes are different, usually expanded, but they're telling the exact same story, and both operate in canon at the same time without the world exploding. But Tony Gilroy explained that's not really what they've intended. They are trying to keep what happened in Rebels its own thing, canon alongside Andor. So basically how he explains it is Mon Mothma gives her speech in the Senate. Then after being exfilled by Cassian, she's picked up by Gold Squadron. She delivers another speech. Then Phoenix Squadron, i.e. the Rebels crew, meet her, take her the rest of the way. She gets in the nonsense with with the TIE Defender. And then above Dantooine, she gives a final call for arms against the Empire, where we see the Rebel Alliance truly start to form. So again, my expectation was that they'd just keep it to 2 speeches with slightly different wording in Rebels, but, you know, hopefully no one's losing sleep over that. But in the end, now there are 3 speeches, which, I don't know, it doesn't bother me either. I just think it's kind of unnecessary. All right, before we go, I will answer a few hashtag AskEck questions. The first one comes from Hydraken, who says, does Mon Mothma's family have a story written post joining the rebellion? What, if anything, do you think will be revisited in the finale? So far, we know nothing about Mon Mothma's family after the events of Andor. We know some from before Andor, based on the Alexander Freed novel Mask of Fear, which we've talked about on the channel. I do think we will see one final shot of Perrin, and I think we'll learn a little bit more about his character. Perrin, to me, very, very interesting. Obviously, he's a hedonist, and I just wonder what else is in there. We then have 2 questions, funny enough, and I swear I didn't look at this in advance, which actually ask the question I just answered, So yeah, the damage taken by the droids is an inconsistency, and the speeches are meant to be different speeches. I will say, though, there has been some discussion about whether Bail is on Yavin based on this shot here, and yeah, that would be inconsistent with what he said in the episode, but this doesn't need to be Yavin. There are conference rooms across the entire galaxy. This could be the back room of the Imperial Senate. It could be on his personal Corellian Corvette. Who knows? All right, last question. We'll temporarily get off Andor. Turtle Chanel asks, in large hyperspace lanes, for example, the one that leads to Coruscant, how do the millions of ships avoid hitting each other? There are billions, if not more, people traveling through these lanes, yet none of them collide. Well, they would have collided sometimes, but yes, there is a system. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific novel. It's just something that happens sometimes in Star Wars Legends. We know that basically, if you're traveling the main hyperspace lanes and doing so like in an official, i.e. non-smuggling capacity, you'll check in with various stations to get route updates, which will also have traffic instructions. So you basically have your Navi computer talk to a traffic computer. It updates your maps because remember, the galaxy always is moving. And I'm guessing it also positions traffic in a way that collisions are at the very least as unlikely as possible. It's also possible that there are internal safety systems on ships which help prevent collisions, or that the space within hyperspace just does not work in the same way. But yeah, I can't think of any stories in Legends where ships crash together in hyperspace, other than there's one of the old comics where ships come out and hit a Star Destroyer, a Super Star Destroyer, I think. In canon, the best example would be the hyperspace disaster from the beginning of the High Republic. Anyway, that's all I've got. See you next time.